One of the most beautiful stops on our tour in search of Glenn Gould was the Glenn Gould Studio, jewel of the Canadian Broadcasting Centre at CBC Building. The studio was named after the most celebrated Canadian classical pianist of the 20th century, and they honoured the legacy of Glenn Gould by operating as a centre of excellence for Canadian and international performances, recordings and events. If you are in Toronto and pass in front of the Glenn Gould Studio, take your chance for a photo opportunity or a selfie with Glenn, waiting for you sitting on the bench in front of the entrance, immortalized in bronze by the sculptor Ruth Abernethy. The dedication and commitment of the great Canadian pianist gave Ruth the impetus to create a dynamic sculpture that seems to move and dialogue with anyone who sits next to him. In the entrance hall, there is a small museum dedicated to Glenn Gould, with a whole wall of photographs that trace the career and life of the great Canadian pianist, his discs, the debut, and the most iconic moments. The room also houses the famous Chickering piano, his childhood piano. Gould bought his famous Chickering piano in 1955. He was Gould's first love. During our exclusive and not open to the public visit, we interviewed Greg DeClute, a sound technician who took us to the splendid auditorium which hosts performances by world artists such as Mariah Carey, Rod Stewart, Oscar Peterson and many others, where, among the others, they recorded the Children's List soundtrack. Greg told us many anecdotes and details of the hall and his acoustic, which is used as sound system worthy of the great artist it hosts. Glenn was a sound perfectionist, and the recordings were of great importance to him. He spent days with Lon Chalk, sound technician in the studios of that age, played the piano, trying new sounds and editing. Glenn Gould worked a lot with CBC, and he has recorded numerous radio and television broadcasts, often with the participation of Eric Till, John McGravy, Lon Chalk and Vern Edquist. The backstage console is very modern and super equipped, ideal for recordings, which Gould would certainly have appreciated. Greg showed us the main features of the studios. Guys, what a technology! Thank you, Greg. The staff was very kind and welcomed us with open arms. Congratulations everyone for the excellent work you're doing. Keep it up. You can follow the Glenn Gould Studio on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook and their official website. And now, the John Fraser's interview. Friends, we are here with John Fraser, author and journalist and friend of Glenn Gould. Good evening, dear John. How are you?
Good evening. Nice to be here.
Thank you. So we have a lot of musicians that follow us today from Italy. Would you love to say something to them that follow us?
My Italian's pretty bad, but I've said ciao. Buongiorno.
Have you ever been in Italy?
Yes, I was posted by a newspaper here to cover a mafia trial in Sicily. So I've been to Sicily, I've been to Rome. My university has an exchange with a campus in Siena.
How did you met Glenn and when?
Well, I guess I should start by saying that my parents were among many people who bought that first recording of the Goldberg Variations. So I knew it, and I knew he was an icon. And then I went to university in island off the coast, east coast of Canada called Newfoundland, and it's an unusual place. It joined Canada quite late, not till 1949, and it is got a very distinctive culture. It is the only distinctive English culture in Canada. The other one, there's the French culture in Quebec. But anyway, Gould, and they're also offbeat people, slightly off-center. And Glenn Gould, if anyone was off-center, it was Glenn Gould. And he wanted to do a radio documentary about Newfoundland, and typically with Gould, it was a slightly arcane idea. He wanted to treat them all as a collective people that had done things differently, that had been molded by the ocean, by the North Atlantic, had been molded by poverty. It's one of the poorest parts of the country, and yet who were resilient and survivors. So all of this appealed to him. So he came down. Typically, he hadn't organized very much. His CBC locally down there was supposed to be helping him, but he just wanted to get out and about. And I simply recognized him in the Hotel Newfoundland, maybe about 10 minutes after he got out of a taxi from the airport. And I went up to him, and I'm not shy, and I said, "What are you doing here? You're my hero. I've been listening to your music. I've just been listening to it, and I'm a young journalist also, as well as a university student. Would you ever let me do an interview with you?" And he looked at me and he said, "You could be of some use to me." So right there and then, he kind of hired me, not for money, but for the promise of an interview, to be his driver. I had a car, a nasty car, and I said I'd take him around the bay, as we say in Newfoundland. And we hit it off. He knew I loved his music. I didn't get any particular insight into his attitude to performance or his views on Johann Sebastian Bach, but I got a lot of insight into his sense of humor. We kidded a lot, we joked about people, we made a lot of fun about politicians, and I think I got him into the legislature, the provincial legislature, to hear. I said, "You've got to see a real demagogue. His name is Joey Smallwood." And so he came in, and I got access to the reporters gallery at the provincial legislature. So he came. He loved doing all of those things. He was out for an adventure, and I had no idea what he was going to do with it. He didn't take notes. At least he didn't take notes while we were talking or going about, or when he was talking to people. But he got ideas, and then later he went with the CBC sound engineers, and he got sounds of Newfoundland, sounds of the sea, sounds. Well, you can hear the documentary. It's quite a famous one. From that, we stayed in touch, and we have a correspondence of quite a silly correspondence, because I knew he liked joking. So I pretended he was a famous fussy German composer, and I was always sending him commissions. There's some amusing letters somewhere in some archive between him and me. And then my musical career, his musical career proceeded quite well. I did graduate work. I was going to become an academic, but after doing a master's degree, I decided I didn't want to do that. So I became an arts writer for the Globe and Mail, the national newspaper here. And I did some reviewing. Glenn and I kept up a kind of relationship. It wasn't intense, I don't want to overstate it. But he kept in touch, and he was a night hawk. So usually our conversations were over the telephone, and usually they came at 2 or 3 in the morning. After I got married, they ended very fast. My wife wasn't going to put up with them. But up until then, we had an interesting midnight telephone rendezvous conversations. And then I got posted to the People's Republic of China, and he got quite excited about that. He wanted to do a radio documentary on China, but in the end, he didn't want to go there. So he thought if I was there, I could go to the places that he should go to, and I could report to him, and from that, he could do a kind of commentary, and somehow they would pick up the sounds of China. And I said, Glenn, I don't want anything to do with this idea. It's crazy. I mean, I'm a typical egotistical journalist. If I'm going to do all that work, I want the credit for it. I'm not going to give it even to someone as famous as you. But if you come over here, I will go around with you. I'll take you everywhere. I'll protect you. I can speak a bit of Chinese. I know all the people from the information department. So he toyed with the idea of coming, but and we talked about it, but it never happened. But it would have been such fun, maybe.
Absolutely.
But it was the Cultural Revolution was just ending. It was not an easy time still in China, and there was still a lot of persecution going on.
Of course.
And then I came back, and then the son of a gun died. So young, so young. And I was at the service at St. Paul's. It was a beautiful service. It played the hymns that he liked. It had, I think they played the opening theme of the Goldberg Variations, both from the first recording and from the last recording. That life that was the recording life that was encapsulated between the two ways of looking at the Goldberg Variation: the young man's and the departing man.
When you think privately about Glenn, which is the first thing that's come up into your mind?
That he was an amazing genius. That he brought, by reinterpreting Johann Sebastian Bach, he brought him back to all of us as a living, breathing partner in music. He and Bach were like this. Lots of people would disagree with that, but that's what I think of. And then, for me personally, I remember his humor. It was offbeat and sometimes a little arch, but that was his instinct, was to have some fun.
Yeah.
And something that maybe other people didn't see. I don't know why I was the beneficiary of it, but I was. Yeah.
And what do you think about the era that we live in? So you work also in media, in communications. So what do you think about social media now? Glenn Gould was fascinated by new technology. So what do you think about the changes that's coming up in this
it's hard to predict, but I think he would have loved any of the new technology because it gave him some distance from actually dealing with people. It kept people at a distance. He's got a kind of parallel figure in Canada. It's always struck me, a parallel figure in Margaret Atwood, who also is one of the famous tweeters and Facebook people, even though she's a prolific author. But when you're very, very famous, sometimes too much proximity to the people who idolize you or hate you is not productive to health. And I think he would have loved being able to tweet. It's my guess that he would.
So solitude is a necessary thing to create art, as Glenn said.
He valued his privacy. Yeah, he did. And there's still things we're learning about him that we didn't know then. He had as you know, he had a relationship with a wonderful lady. None of us knew, or most of us didn't know anything about that at all. But I think we imagined him as maybe, I don't know, just up in that apartment building. You know the apartment building, have you driven by where he used to live?
Yes.
On St. Clair, yeah. I have a good story about that apartment. It's on St. Clair Avenue, and it was quite famous. People would go by and just look up and imagine him in it. And there was quite a famous author here for an authors festival who was a Glenn Gould fan. This was after Glenn had died, and he wrote A Suitable Boy, a famous novel in India, and Vikram Seth was his name. Wonderful writer. And so I took him there, and we just by some amazing serendipity, there was the Goldberg Variations going on the radio, and the CBC was programming it. So we drove there, and we stayed. I parked the car across the street, and we were at the sort of the 18th variation, and we just looked up. It kind of kind of like being in church, you know, with awe. And then the final aria was repeated, and the announcer came on and said that was Rosalind Turek playing the Goldberg Variations. We completely got it wrong. I think we'd even commented that we could hear Glenn grunting. And Vikram turned to me and he said, that was very embarrassing.
When you work with Glenn, there's something that you remember clearly in your mind. You work together. That's something that would you like to say to us?
The strongest memory I have is that very first meeting, my excitement, that he was actually in this somewhat remote place, at least it was then, and that we discovered that we both could be of use to each other. Me for, it was a lucky break to get a big interview. The newspaper was a good daily, but they didn't know too much about classical music, but they gave me a whole newspaper page to let him ramble. And I sent it to him, and the only comment he made was that, you make me sound like I go on and on and on. And I said, you do. So my first memory of him remains my strongest and happiest, that it was the excitement of beginning of a relationship, sort of.
Thank you for,
thank you.
China.
Grazie.
And, we're waiting for you in Milan, as I said. And,
my book on China was published in Italian. I can't remember. It's called The Chinese. What would that be in how do you say The Chinese in Italian? How does it?
Il Cinese?
Cinese, that's what it's called.
Yeah.
It was published in 1981. So there you go. I'm an Italian author.
Beautiful. Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you.
And see you soon in Milan.
Okay.